too.
Yeah.
I think we should start going here. Hang on. So, friends, welcome. My name is Stephen Fetter. I manage the United Learning Program, which is the online learning program for the General Counsel Office. And it is a pleasure to welcome you and to say Happy New Year to you. It's amazing how long we've been doing this now, and yet there's always new stuff to share. So delightful to be with you, and thank you for joining us. I know that I have sent many of you far too many reminders. And as we begin, I wanted to apologize for some of the hiccups we've had in the ChurchX system. As I was saying to those of you who gathered early, ChurchX is extremely powerful and extremely complicated, and we're still learning how it works. So you got a few extra reminders this month as my colleague and I were trying to make sure that you get reminded in February and March and April and May. And every time she copied it, it sent it out before she could change the dates on it. And we both are still wiping our egg off our faces from that one. But it means you will get reminders every other month right now through till June. And that's where they came from. So thanks for your grace and for your understanding, and just throw away the extra ones and know we're working hard to learn something new, and sometimes fall on our faces doing it. That's part of the fun, right? Anyway, having said that, let me turn the microphone over to the boss, and we'll let Eric take it away. Over to you.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We're calling this presentation New Year News. And frankly, there's a lot more of it than I thought there would be. It just seems to keep coming. But this particular month, we've got a lot of stuff that I think will be helpful for you to know and help us get the word out. So as the regulars know, and there are many here, we always post the creed, but also take a moment to do a brief land acknowledgement. And it's weird doing a land acknowledgement when we're completely spread out over the entire land. And I would just say that we begin this meeting by acknowledging that wherever we are, we're meeting on land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people from the beginning, and that long before today's Indigenous peoples have been, long before today, Indigenous peoples have been stewards of this place. We're grateful for the opportunity to gather this way, and when we can in person, and we thank all the generations of people who've taken care of the land where we are today. We recognize and deeply appreciate the contribution of Indigenous peoples. First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples have made centuries of contribution in shaping and strengthening the community, our communities, our province, our territories, and our country. And as settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous people must be clearly and overtly connected to our collective conscience to make the promise of truth and reconciliation real in our communities and in our time. May it be so. So tonight, just a ton of, or at least I think so, of CRA news. Maybe we've got a lot of experienced treasurers on the line. Maybe it's fairly blasé for you, but let's test that out. We have some less good news about the underutilized housing tax. We'll talk about that. And we'll cover some annual tasks, annual payroll things, annual assessment, annual statistics this time of year, and ongoing update on the insurance initiative, which has been a lot of my time in particular. Okay, first of all, on the CRA side, the dental care thing was a concern last fall when we talked about it, but Angelica and her team and ADP took care of that for us for 2023, so that was good news. On the another piece of good news last fall was a very, very big deal, which was this T3 reporting that potentially we're going to have to report on every single restricted fund a church has, which would have been literally thousands of them across the country. As we hoped and predicted, the CRA stepped back from that. We did go for a CRA ruling on the underutilized tax, and it has come back acknowledging that our situation is goofy and the filing is unnecessary, but it is legally mandated. So there'll be more communication on that. The new T3010 is something that is out there now, if you've checked it out online, but we'll be covering the highlights tonight. And if Clyde and I have a chance over the next week or 10 days, we might even see if we can record an updated version of the T3010 completion. But there is a comprehensive how to do a T3010, which is the annual filing of a charitable return, which is the single biggest compliance thing out there. There is a recording on Church Hub already from last year, and tonight I'll be covering the new bits. And Clyde will probably be chipping in with the more detailed completion, because frankly, some of the stuff that is now mandatory, I haven't filled in 10 years, in the sense that when the original disbursement quota went away, I stopped filling in those fields because they were irrelevant as far as I was concerned. Anyway, here we go. So T3 reporting, this just talked about it. There is a CRA administrative ruling. The Income Tax Act says that all this has to be reported, but the CRA Charities Directorate has said that's great, but we're not going to require it for charities because there isn't an income tax implication and there's no revenue involved. And so that's really good news for us. That would have been quite onerous for a lot of treasurers, and frankly, really onerous for any foundation or big organization. The bad news, I mentioned it, we did get an unfavorable ruling. It's a silly technicality. We have, according to our church statistics, we have about 400 manses out there. And where there is a manse, there is going to be a reporting requirement. And we're going to be writing those people as best we can. And so if you have a manse, feel free to flip us a note or watch for this, because we will be providing detailed instructions. It's not complicated. It's just a real nuisance. And the irony is, the United Church Manual says you have to have between 3 and 15 trustees. This rule is so goofy that if you have 15 trustees, 15 individuals each have to complete a form. It's just a joke. Well, I mean, don't get me started, but by the same token, there are penalties for not filing. So it's one of these shut up and do it things. Okay, the new T3010. Okay, the number, they always have numbers beside them. It has a 24 beside it. And there are some significant changes. Now, if you file online, which is where we're all being pointed to, you'll always have the current version of the form, depending on what year you're filing for. But if you're doing paper filing still, you want to be careful to make sure you have the right version, because it's one of these things where it's an automatic rejection. Even though the numbers might be identical, it's an automatic rejection if you file a T3010 on the wrong form. So what's new on there? Okay, first of all, there's no longer a need to report 10-year gifts, which were really, I mean, in most cases for us, bequests that had an endowment component. There's new and significant reporting for disbursement quota. Longtime treasurers might remember that 15 years ago, charities had an obligation. There was a calculation based on what percentage of donations was spent on charitable activity. It's not as onerous as that, but it's still a bunch of new paperwork and a couple of calculations that we'll talk about in more detail. There's also reporting required for donor-advised funds. I was thinking that this didn't apply to churches at all, but it could if you had a bursary award type program, and the donor of that money still had some say in who got the award. So there's a chance that this could apply to a few churches, but generally speaking, the donor advised rules won't. And then there's a new form for qualifying disbursements where there is some wriggle room now to grant to a body that isn't a charity. But for most of you, I recommend staying away from that. And I'll say a few more words about that later. Okay, donor advised funds. Again, scholarship, there's a scholarship bursary, and there's a donor that still has a significant say, I would take the view if they have a vote or part of a selection committee or something, you might want to consider that a donor advised fund. It's not that big a deal to report, but it's basically when it's an account. Foundations have lots of them where an individual has set up a fund that the church administers. If you have those, I don't see them in the churches I work with, but if you do, there is still an opportunity to do some reporting on it. And what you need to report is the normal kind of details that we report, we track anyway for a restricted fund. In this case, it would be the number of accounts that you might hold, the total value of the accounts at the end of the period, the total value of donations received during that year, and the total value of disbursements. Now, the United Church Foundation, for example, has a lot of these funds, and there's probably, I would think hundreds, but most of you won't have any. And if you think there's, my advice here would be if there's still significant donor involvement, like one donor for a significant pot of money, why not call it a donor advised fund? There's no harm. It doesn't limit you in any way, and you're being compliant. But I would say for 90% of you, this doesn't apply. Okay, the disbursement quota, though, does. And this is a calculation. There's a new schedule, Schedule 8. And it's kind of fun. Someday we'll have a pop quiz on what the various schedules were. I think I can remember most of them. 7 was political activity, wasn't it, Clyde, back in the day? But anyway, basically there's a calculation and there's a definition. Maybe many of you have been filling this in already. For the charities I personally do T3010s for, I haven't filled this in years because it didn't affect anything. Clyde has probably been more diligent. Clyde, have you been filling in those numbers, line 5900 and 5910?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. So again, if Clyde hasn't, Clyde's my top guru. So if he hasn't, this is why this might be new for many of us. So I'll speak to this. This applies to folks who have $100,000 or more in cash investments or capital property. And here's the kicker that they did not use on charitable activity. But what does that mean? Okay, well, coincidentally, we'll talk about that. The first thing you do is you'll list the average value of these properties, and we'll talk about it. And this goes into the calculation. What was the amount of your I'm going to say balance sheet or assets or wealth that you weren't using for charitable purposes? And I've heard people argue that, well, hold on a second, we use investments because we use the investment income. But in fact, the investments, are sitting there and they're passive. So the most normal definition of resources not used in charitable activity is your investment balances. I personally take the view that cash, at least, you do need to run the charity, but I'll take guidance from Clyde on that as well. These other elements, the amount of any accumulated property, if you have permission to accumulate, again, that's a dated concept that I would say none of our churches have needed or used, maybe one church in all of Canada that I'm thinking of. But that number is zero for virtually everybody. And of course, the expenditures and the grants made and the stuff, those are just all numbers right from your T3010. When you go through the calculation, and we'll show you that in a second, if there is a shortfall, you've got some time to remedy it, and you then could look to see if you've had overages. But in my experience, every church in Canada that I've ever seen, with the possible exception of one, doesn't fall into this. They would all have huge disbursement carry forwards because you need to be able to demonstrate that it's a 5% threshold, and 5% of your investments, you're spending more than that to pay the minister and run your church almost always. So when you see the calculation and do the calculation, I don't think any of you will bump into a problem. So again, what is this definition? What is property not used for charitable activities? So if you owned a vacant lot, that would be an example of real estate that you would need to have a value for, and you would lump in here. It would tend to include your stocks, bonds, your investments. Notice here, this is the wording from the CRA. It says may include. I personally would exclude cash, and Clyde, I'll ask you to comment more fully here at the end. But certainly I would take the view long-term investments. That's a pretty normal definition to say that you're not using those day to day to run your charitable activity. And if you have vacant land, that also counts. Here's an example, though, that CRA has used that bothers me a little bit. If part of your building is 100% devoted to non-charitable activities, which would be renting it out to a school or a daycare, then that portion of your building should also be included in the calculation. None of us have ever done this, so this will be a little bit of figuring it out as we go. But again, neither Clyde nor I have done this reporting, and we've been filing for, my case, 20 years, and Clyde probably longer than that. So just to say that the calculation is going to be new and need to be figured out. But if you went first with investments and then decided whether any real estate belonged in there, you wouldn't be far off. So this is from the So what is the property? What is the number? And historically, for this year, for the 2023 calendar year, the lines 5900 and 5910 ask for a numbers of what portion of your assets are not used. These are the fields that Clyde and I haven't filled in since 2010. Normally, it would be investment balances. So you would go and look at your January 1 investment balance for 2021, and that would be line 5900, 24 months in advance of the current period. So if this sounds complicated, it's not really. You have to count, you have to sit here and you go on your fingers like, what's 24 months from January 1st, 2023, but it's 2 years back. Once you have these numbers, then it's a matter of completing Schedule 8. And again, I think 99% of you, when you do the calculation, you realize it's a bit of extra work, but you won't have a disbursement quota problem. So that's as much as I'm going to cover tonight on that particular form. The other form that's new is a T1441, which is a bit like.
Can I interrupt you? Because
Shoot.
you created a lot of anxiety.
Uh-oh. Well, I
And
thought the complexity might. Go ahead.
yeah, and so I think before we jump into your next slide, if we could just back up and look at some of the questions that are coming in about the disbursement quota, that I think people would find it easier to remember if we deal with questions at the same time as you're doing the presentation. Is that
Let's
okay?
go. Yep.
So a lot of questions about which investments count and are included. Sylvia wants to know about the Mance fund, which is restricted. They're only allowed to use the interest, but they use the interest for the minister's housing allowance usually. Is that
Yes.
count
Any,
here?
yeah, anything, there isn't going to be, uh, anything you list on your return as long-term investments, that number 2 years ago is what would go in there, in my opinion, as a starting point. But
Uh,
yes,
how about our thrift shop as a non-charity? We use the funds to run the church, but we're actually running this little store.
well, a thrift shop doesn't sound like an investment. Uh,
But it's
and
space
again,
being used
it's
by the thrift shop, I guess is what they're thinking.
yeah. So I would argue that there you're using real estate to do revenue generation.
For your charity.
Yeah,
Okay, so it would not count then for the disbursement quota.
yeah.
Got it. And
And
somebody else,
again, there could be guidance coming out on this. The real estate one is the one that caused me to tense up a little bit. I'm sitting there going, "Oh, crap, you have to do that for schools and daycares and stuff."
well, yeah, that one hit me too. But James is saying, what about rooms that are sometimes used for non-charitable purposes, but otherwise used for church purposes?
Room rentals and stuff are, and I know this language really well, a legitimate use of surplus charitable capacity, and absolutely don't count.
And
I
that's
think,
true for
yeah,
Girl Guides and choirs too.
absolutely. That's
Right.
true for anything where they don't have their own lock and key, and you don't go in there.
What if you've got a park adjacent to your church and you sometimes use it for worship and picnics?
I'm not sure. Again, I would, you're not going to get in too much trouble on this anyway, because there's so much room for churches. Our buildings generally aren't going to count. So I wouldn't get, you can't get in a lot of trouble on this, but I would err on the side of if it's a vacant lot, that is clearly something you're not using. If it's an adjacent land that you do use periodically for programming, I think you could take a very liberal interpretation and say that's part of our programming.
And what about a manse that's being rented out?
That is not for a manse with a minister.
No, a manse without a minister.
No,
A
I get
manse
that.
rented out to a third party.
Yeah, no, I get that. A manse with a minister is clearly charitable activity and part of the operation of the. A manse being rented out, I think you would need to include as not used for charitable purpose.
Okay. So back up. What is the issue here? Somebody is just saying, give us again in a thumbnail. We've got these funds that are not being used for charitable purposes, these funds that are. What's the quota issue?
It's actually targeted more towards foundations and so on to make them use at least a bit of their money. But the calculation is the disbursement quota is 5%. So if you have $1 million, you need to show that you're spending at least $50,000 on charitable activity. If you have $10 million, you need to show that you're spending, what's that? Is that 500,000?
500.
Yeah. So you need a serious whack of assets for this to impact you.
So 5% has to be used for charitable. 95% could be used for some other purpose before we run into trouble.
5%, I'm going to say it slightly differently. The more you use for charitable purpose, the better, generally
Of
speaking.
course.
But yes, this is really targeted not so much towards churches as to foundations, so that they're not hoarding all their money.
That's exactly where it is they don't want the money just sitting there doing nothing. They want it to be used.
Okay. Thank you. You created a flurry of questions. I think you've answered most of them.
Yeah.
And the questions I'm seeing now are variations of the questions that came in before. If there's anybody who's still anxious about it, add to the chat, but otherwise I think we should go on.
Okay, and just to say, folks, this I would consider this a bit more of a nuisance than anything. But once you look at the numbers, you'll realize that, first of all, you have to go back the 2 years to get your investment balances from a couple of years ago if you haven't been filling in that form. Okay, and most of us haven't, so that's a nuisance. But once you do it, it's pretty plug and play, and you'll realize it's something of a non-event for us. I'm thinking of one church that had a huge windfall out in BC that might get caught up in this, but I don't even think they will.
So the big impact here is that we've got to report on lines that we're not used to reporting on. It's not
That's
that we're
exactly-
going to lose our charitable status or we're going to have to spend more money or
Yeah.
something else. I mean, it's not going to have anything other than nuisance factors, what you're saying.
It's about 10 extra minutes of your time a year.
That costs.
Yeah, no, it's still a nuisance.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. And again, this form, there might be folks who, have a really particularly worthy cause that isn't a charity. And I haven't gone into this in detail. I've told most churches just to stay away from it because you need to have a degree of direction and control. And however, it is possible if you have a situation that you think is particularly deserving, you should read up a little more or send Clyde and I a note about this notion of being able to grant to non-qualified donees. But the thing is, you need to report on it as well. And this would be an exhibit just like the T1236, where you report your donations to other charities. Now you're reporting to organizations that might not be charitable or might not yet have charitable status. But again, not a big deal. Honest. And a couple of repeat slides, just in case. I've got every year, it's down from dozens and dozens to a handful a year if you lose your charitable status. But I just repeat this slide. If you're into that, there's a separate webinar that's available. There's support from the national office, there's support from your regional office, and there are some steps to follow. But basically, in a nutshell, what you have to do is normally you lose charitable status by failing to file that return. Of all the things you do as a treasurer, just file your T3010 on time and go from there. So I've just listed this for anyone who might be impacted. Okay, again, a repeat slide, just because we're talking about regulatory things. The alternative minimum tax affects generally very affluent people with passive assets, and the large donor philanthropy community was lobbying against this for a long time. It doesn't really affect too many of us on an annual basis with our churches, but just something to be aware of. And the foundation has more information on that. I flagged this last time, and I can guarantee you that the service level from at least the United UCC Protect United program, if you ever need proofs of insurance for events, you might also now need them for grant applications. This was particularly true for the Ontario government, but I suspect we'll see more and more of that. Again, this is a repeat slide. So tried to cover as much regulatory stuff there, and we've already dealt with some T3010 questions, but anything else out there, Steve?
Sure, yeah, and I'm going to let the rest of the disbursement quota questions just sit on the meeting chat, but I will give the chat to Eric and Clyde after our program. So if there's something that's not covered in what he's just said, then one of them will get back to you by email within a couple of days. But if we can back up just a little bit, I've got a few questions about the underutilized housing reporting.
Yes.
First of all, will this ruling have any application to an empty residential lot that years ago used to have a manse on it?
I honestly don't know. But if it isn't an existing housing, I'm not sure how you could like, I don't think it applies to empty lots, to the best of my knowledge.
So the fact that there's no house there now doesn't mean fact that there was a house there once doesn't trigger somebody's.
No, as goofy as this rule is, that's still a vacant lot now, I would think.
Sounds good. John Morton wants to know who are the trustees of the manse?
It depends. It typically, again, the normal in a single point charge, property is the best practice is to have property held in the name of, quote unquote, the trustees of, Bella Coola United Church, since that's where John is, but keeping it generic so you don't have to update it all the time. And in that case, the manse would typically be held in that title as well. It's because there's a trust arrangement that's triggering this request. So if it's whatever it says on title to begin with. John, if it just said your name on title, there wouldn't be the same obligation to report. It's the trust arrangement that's causing the problem.
Okay, good. Thank you. And Diane wants to know, is this refer to all manses or just ones occupied by a minister?
I think it applies to all manses because they're housing units. Basically, what they're targeting off out of country owners, and they're targeting properties that are owned by trusts or numbered companies that might. I'll leave it at that.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Couple of sort of quick questions. Is there a deadline by which you have to have an annual meeting each year?
Well, I think that it's suggested in the manual that you try to have your annual meeting as early as possible in the year to finalize the budget and so on. During COVID, we were granting extensions. So I don't even know offhand if there's an exact date, but the normal course is to have an annual meeting as early in the year as possible to get your budget approved.
Last time I checked the manual on that, which was years ago, it said as early in the year as is practicable, which is
that's exactly what it is, and it's not practical to have it too early because financial statements can't be prepared tomorrow.
Well, and that's it. And Easter is early this year. So
that's right.
In my church, we've set it for a couple of weeks after Easter because it's not practicable to hold it on Palm Sunday.
Yeah. And my church as well is having it in April this year. But again, during COVID, it was a little more open-ended. But I think we've answered that.
Sure, thank you. And deadline for the T3010, still June 30?
The deadline for T3010s is June 3rd. It's 6 months after the fiscal year end of the entity, which in 95% of our cases is December 31st and therefore June 30th.
Right.
However, I always say send it in, like this, just crap happens, like it can get lost in the mail or something. Send it in. Again, do that. Just get it out of the way as early as you can.
Do it electronically and it doesn't get lost in the mail.
Point taken. Absolutely.
Works really well. Donor advised funds. I've got several questions and more coming in. So basically just a little more clarity, I think, on what is a donor advised fund. Liz is saying we have a scholarship fund set up, but no donations for years, no expenses for a few years. Is that what this is?
Again, if the definition is the wording that I provided there before, a donor advised fund is one where an individual donor has given a charity a pot of money and still has influence over like a vote or something on where the money might be granted or awarded. So again, for 90, I'm going to say 85, 90% of churches, I don't think they have any donor advised funds. My own church has a millennial youth award thing where a bunch of people donated to it. That's not a donor advised fund. That's a restricted fund. But if Steve Fetter, who once had an association with my church, if he made a donation to, for a bursary to attend theological school or something, and was consulted on the decision process, that could arguably be a donor advised fund.
So for the record, I was 5 years old when I left your church, Eric, and I have not made any donations to it.
Yeah.
What about a fund that gets donations from a bunch of church members, some of whom are also on the decision-making committee?
That is not a donor advised fund.
Okay, thank you. I think we're doing pretty well. So there are other little technicalities coming up in the chat, but mostly what I'm oh, there's an interesting question that's different. Can influence extend in perpetuity if it's stated in their will?
Well, if they're stated in their will,
I guess
I'm not sure how they'd have
executor.
influence if they were dead, but
Well, maybe their executor would, though, eh?
again, a normal donor advised fund, just maybe I'll say it a different way. A normal donor advised fund these days is if I make a lump sum charitable donation to the Toronto Foundation, and can ask them to make grants from that each year to my favorite charities, but I wanted to drop a lump sum in there, for tax planning or something. That's what a normal donor advised fund is. It would be very unusual in a church setting. Until this afternoon, I was going to say we didn't have any, and I thought, well, hold on, there could be a sole donor bursary or scholarship out there that maybe meets the definition of a donor advised fund.
Yeah.
Again, read up on it, but I would say the likelihood of it applying in our setting is low, but not zero.
Most of what we'd have would be restricted funds, where you have to
Exactly.
use the funds for accessibility or something, but not come back to the donor to sign off on the contractor. Am I understanding correctly?
That's right. I actually think it should be, I think you wouldn't get in trouble interpreting having no donor advised funds. I just threw out the possibility of if there was a really unusual situation where your scholarship or bursary committee was one person who happened to have donated the money.
Thank you. I think we'll leave it at that and go on with the show.
Okay. So we talked, just a few things. ADP took care of this dental benefit reporting. But I just flag it here because we do have a bigger audience than last time. This was a concern because the initial reports we got last fall was that every ADP administrator was going to have to put in some data. Turned out not to be the case. And, there'll be more procedures for 2024, but the immediate pressure was off on that one. Again, there's only a couple of codes anyway, but that was taken care of, and it's a T4 annual requirement. So if anything changes for 2024, we'll have lots of time to adapt over the course of the year. Again, ADP took care of all the normal statutory, the annual changes and limits and percentages and all those kinds of things, and ADP has automated a whole bunch of the workman's comp levels here, and I list them. These were reminders from the last couple of webinars. And I'll just say we have regrets tonight from Angelica, but Eileen Dye, who I consider our payroll guru, is available if there's anything that I can't handle or Clyde can't help with. Okay, for first of all, the tax, the ADP T4 runs and stuff, that's all right now, basically. So hopefully you've double checked all your stuff and signed off. Important to note that these are all electronic filings these days. So everybody out there should have basically double checked their work, and this should not be a surprise, anything on this slide. One reminder to have made any minister salary adjustments if there are ministers that are paid at the minimum level or linked to the minimum level. But this should be water under the bridge for all of you. And if it's generating any questions in the chat, hopefully, there might need to be some remedial action, but hopefully this is all known to you.
There is one question. Let me ask it right away. Somebody says, I've always submitted my payments directly to Workman's Comp. Am I misunderstanding that ADP takes care of that now and I don't have to?
I don't know if Eileen's on the call, but my understanding is that unless you code something to have it taken, paying direct would still work.
Thank you. So if you have a specific question about that, Carrie, then reach out by email.
Mhm. Okay, I'll keep going.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, a repeat slide, but just to direct people to it, we have all of the treasurers out there are paying a not insignificant contribution to the pension plan. But we're really fortunate to have an incredible, I want to say I staff the governance committees, just an incredible talent pool of investment experts, actuaries, lawyers, and stuff who volunteer their time to govern the pension plan, and the report is available there, and it's a pretty quick read. Treasurers tend to think of it as a cost. It is 9% of a 9% employer contribution, but it's great to have a defined benefit pension plan for staff, and there aren't that many of them around anymore. Again, for the foundation, just to say, busy season is December for that, but a great way, very particularly when the stock markets are up the way they are right now, a great way to make a gift is through a gift of appreciated stock. There's significant tax advantage, and my church does this a fair bit, and I highly recommend it. At my church 20 years ago, I went through some very annoying paperwork to have my own RBC direct account for the church. But that kind of paperwork is quite annoying because we're unincorporated. We have to explain ourselves, and you have to get a letter from the national office quite often. If you only have an occasional stock gift, Head and Shoulders, the best way to do it is to run it through the foundation. Have your donor send the stock there. It comes to your church. Very good fee. That's charged for the service. The foundation does the tax receipting, and it's a great deal. So I'm going to take a breath and then talk about what used to be my favorite topic, and I'm getting very sick of it, frankly. But anyway, the United Church UCC Protect Direct program, where the United Church is participating in the risk and so on. Most of you know this, but we really rushed it into place because the insurance rates were just skyrocketing. They've more or less doubled or even more in the last number of years. And the United Church basically put some money in to have what's called a captive insurance arrangement. And on the financial side, it's doing exactly what we hoped so far. I'm knocking on wood because it's all contingent on good claims experience. But we have saved congregations well over $1 million each of the 2 years that we've been up running now. And that's a great story. My congregation and most of yours, like virtually all congregations on a pure apples to apples basis, are paying the same or less for insurance than they were a couple of years ago, when rates outside have gone up by 20 to 30 to 40%. So it's like we are tracking this, and we're finding that we're saving congregations. The number will be close to $1.5 million a year. So that should be a good news story. The bad news is that we absolutely drowned in the service side of it. So the insurance renewal process, all policies in this program are now effective December 1st. And there's about 1,500 that are out there fully corrected. Everyone's happy. And there's about 30 that are still problem cases that are being tidied up. So it's been a challenge. I keep asking myself, would I do it again? And my answer continues to be to save congregations that quantum of money. Yes, I would, but it hasn't been pleasant for anybody. Now, well, I'll just say the increase in premium, everyone got a premium reduction in the first year of the program, knowing that there'd be some adjustment for inflation and so on. So that's what's happened. And we've had all kinds of challenges with data and communications and so on. One thing people are asking for, because there's a refund or credit coming for those who had a June or March initial renewal. I've been following that up weekly, and I am absolutely assured that those will be delivered now in February. I don't want to say early February, but in February. But here's some inside baseball for you. We came up with these customer-friendly wrinkles. We said, why not give every United Church that's participating the benefit of this new deal at the same time, even if their policies don't renew for another 3 or 6 months? So, gee, that's great. It sounds very customer-friendly. It was my idea. I loved it. However, the insurance companies have struggled to get their head around it. The previous insurer, imagine saying to them, hey, yes, we want you to insure these people for another 6 months, but then we want to give a premium discount from that. We want you to give some money back and we'll cover the claims. It's all structures that they're not used to doing. And, that's one of the things where maybe we overcomplicated things. But in any case, going into year 2, on an apples-to-apples basis, participants should be paying less or very level premium a few years down the road than they were in 2021, 2022 before this thing started. That is remarkable in the insurance business. That's where the $1.5 million per year of savings comes in. The good news is I'm absolutely convinced that we've finally broken the back of the service problem. We've got a new team in place. One of the top people was just off getting the last 2 weeks, getting their license so that they can advise on all aspects of new coverage. But basically, Hub is committed to having their service standards in place now with, email and phones answered, emails answered, again in February. So it hasn't been like that, frankly. I'll just be another thing that's coming is I've negotiated a cyber incident response coverage from one of the cyber insurers. This isn't cyber insurance that pays for damages, but it's a go-to. It's a 724 service if you have a problem. And basically it's a referral service. It deals with, tries to solve the relatively mundane problems over the phone. And the reason we like this coverage, which will, costs a fair bit of money, but the reason we like this coverage and will include it is that many of our congregations, in fact, probably more than half, wouldn't qualify for cyber insurance because they don't have the rigor of multi-factor authentication and those kinds of things. So we think having something that gets you to a call center that has 50 people during the day and 20 at night around the clock to serve literally hundreds of thousands of Canadian people on cyber is a good idea. Also, premium savings. So we'll be coming out with, the various ways you can save money in terms of deductibles and alternatives to full replacement cost, those kinds of things. We've been negotiating with the insurers for months on this, and that's all firming up and will be coming out over the next couple of months. So lots happening. Again, a reminder that these inboxes have been set up to deal with specific types of queries. They're being triaged right now and overseen by It's been escalated to the top of the house there. A senior VP and a VP look at this stuff daily right now because they know how unhappy I am with the service level. There are also some reparations behind the scenes, I should add. So anyway, if you're not in the program, UCC Protect Direct, lots of there continues to be folks enrolling every week, but you do need to be underwritten. Like if you've applied somewhere else, you would have provided all this information on insurance application forms. You do need to do that. And the one downside of the program is you can't work with a local broker to do that because they're not getting paid under this program. That's one of the ways we save money. So just to say, new entrants need to be underwritten. So I will stop there.
Okay. So we got a few customer service issues still floating around here.
Yeah,
Eric, and
absolutely.
I'm sorry about that.
You.
Laura says, been waiting since the 20th of December for an urgent request for proof of insurance because it's necessary for a grant. How long is this going to take? What should she do?
My answer to that will be, I can get that for you tomorrow if you write me.
Okay. So Laura, Eric's email address will be on the last slide, but I'll put it in the chat here too when I stop talking, and you can write him an email tonight. Few people looking for a corrected renewal certificate and for premium schedules.
Again, 1,500 folks have, to my knowledge, gotten them squared away. But if there are about 20 or 30 that I know of that are being worked as high priority exceptions. Again, if there's something, feel free to send me an email if you haven't already. And believe me, I don't want these emails, but right now we're escalating and trying to be way more responsive than has been the case.
Thanks. And I see that Maria Pimpinella, your colleague, is also adding her email to the chat and responding to some of those folks saying she would handle some of that too. So there's another resource.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, wonderful to have you online, Maria. Thanks for being with us. I think that's good. I think that we've covered all the issues, even though there are several people behind each of those questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
so again, there's a core group that knows this, but the speech is get online. We learned this during COVID. We can do it. More to the point, the CRA, the government is it's going to be pretty soon the only way to deal with your compliance requirements and so registering your charity. I continue to say there shouldn't be anybody out there that doesn't have a My Business account. If you don't have one, if you're new to this series, we do have a help desk that can talk you through it. And the government has also, the federal government has made, the CRA Charities Directorate has made this really, really user-friendly to do. Like you do have to have, as with anything with the government, if you're registering, you need to have your tax return handy because that's how they verify you as an official person on their files. But it's really pretty user-friendly. Coming back to another account that every treasurer should have is Church Hub. And if there is a changeover in treasurers, please let us know, because this is how we communicate en masse. I mean, we're talking to a couple of hundred treasurers and trustees and finance people tonight, but we need to reach all 2,000. So just a few things. You might know this already if you've looked, but the assessment invoices are online. And many of you are set up for either monthly pre-authorized or quarterly or semi-annual, or maybe you're paying electronically. But the invoices are online. I have a screen shortly on how you can navigate Church Hub if you are new or have forgotten. But we really, really encourage electronic payment, again, for efficiency. Every dollar we can save in administrative cost can go out to do something more impactful for the world. So we really encourage folks. We have a new mailing address, which for those of you who work in business settings, we've finally, instead of having all the payments come in directly to the national office, we've finally gone to what businesses have been doing for the last 20 or 30 years, a lockbox arrangement where we will get same day deposit and electronic transmission of any correspondence and so on. So this is the new mailing address for checks. And this could apply for M&S, this could apply for loan repayments, but be sure to specify on the check whether it's an assessment or M&S or just what it is. Okay, statistics. Susan Jackson will make sure that I always, this time of year, report on this. We have deadlines in March. Folks were asking when they should have their annual meeting. Frankly, we have a separate deadline for single point versus multi-point charges. And basically, I would say get them in as soon as possible. Don't let this drag on into May, June, or July, because if you do, if you miss the administrative cutoff, it could mean your assessment ends up being higher because you want that kind of thing to work off of the most current data possible. My understanding is that this stuff was emailed to every treasurer for whom we have an email address. The book is also online. When it comes to statistics, one thing that's new this year, there's a couple of things that are new. We're trying to do everything as possible as a denomination to work towards reducing our carbon emissions, not just in church buildings, but by individuals, by communities, by education, just generally trying to build a movement around that. And one of the ways we do that is with the Faithful Footprints program that has worked with over 500 congregations now, and more coming in every week. But one of the ways we do this, and it is another reporting requirement. You might have to set up your record keeping so that you can do this more easily, but we are asking people to report on their energy consumption so that we can try to track that as an institution. And ideally, we can try to model this for the world. That's what we're trying to do. We're not just collecting stats here for the sake of collecting stats. Similarly, we're asking for volunteer hours. And we're not necessarily saying log every single one, but we'd like to try to help the world understand. We all know this, how many volunteer hours go into a United Church, but we'd like to try to tell the story better about how incredible the volunteer effort is in Churchland. So we're asking you to report on that. The utilities that you're being asked to report on are the usual, this does entail going and perhaps having someone keep a little spreadsheet or something on electricity usage, oil usage, gas, and so on, propane. It is extra reporting, but it's not just for the fun of it. It's to try to measure and improve on how we impact the world. And similarly on volunteer hours, it can be very much an estimate. I would ask your minister to perhaps come up with a number from the number, your committees and your various activities. A guesstimate is fine. It's not like, it's not a formal filing requirement or anything like that.
I'll bet when people do that, they'll be blown away at the number of volunteer hours. I mean, consider how many person hours go into a single choir practice.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is huge, and churches run on volunteers, and we need to both acknowledge that and thank them.
Yeah. And again, I would think many of the attendees tonight, know how to navigate Church Hub, but we do include this kind of instruction as a reminder, with the screen prints and so on, just to remind folks. And if, Susan Jackson's available to help, Rose Camborne, helps with it, with assessment queries and so on. So, there's lots of support for this. And again, here's some of your, assessment queries, CRA help desk. By now, we don't have as much business as we used to, but please, if there's anybody out there who doesn't have a My Business account, and therefore, when you're done as treasurer, you can go in before and just change it over pretty easily, as opposed to leaving your congregation stranded. So that's a real important one. We've got assessments, church loan payments. We have on the insurance file, we are really, now that we have service level guarantees coming finally from Hub, we really want to channel as many of the queries through that process and measure them and hold them accountable. So we do have all that reference on the church website. And of course, the payroll team continues to add tremendous value in terms of relieving the stress on treasurers. So lots of good stuff there. Steve mentioned we've got email addresses and contact information. You're always welcome to send those along. I'm actually going to be stepping away for a bit of a sabbatical over the next little while, so I will miss the next webinar, and I will have arrangements for backup for questions and so on. We may ask Clyde to take on a bit of a larger role there for any queries from our treasurer constituency. So, Steve, you wanted a bit of time, I think, to talk a little bit about next steps in terms of support for treasurers, that kind of thing.
I did indeed, but before that, we've got questions on statistics. Who knew? Several people want you to know how much work this is to fill it out, just in case you don't know that.
To be honest, I'm just going to say I consider it a necessary evil. It's a tremendous amount of work. You end up having to go to at least 3 or 4 different people, and we generally don't organize our affairs to make it easy to get this stuff. We will look at streamlining some of it, but we believe me, having done it myself, I share your pain.
And so do I. So some questions about how do we get access to the statistics once they're in? People may not know that they're in the yearbook, although they're there by congregation. No, there's nobody doing a kind of high-level summary of things. But the statistics are published every year, aren't they?
Well, just to say, the statistics are available by, first of all, you get a report on your own.
Yeah, no, they're wondering about
for the last 25
regional
years.
Averages and ranges and those kinds of things.
Yeah, those reports are public. They're distributed to the regions. I personally have been requesting that data for over 20 years as a church treasurer, because I wanted to be able to tell my congregation how they were doing on M&S giving or paying the minister or trends and so on. So that information is available. It's available on request. We don't put it out as straight public documents because there's so much data mining and stealing stuff and misusing statistics. But they are available in
electronic form or just on paper?
No, spreadsheet. The preferred means to distribute it is spreadsheet.
So how would somebody request that? Would they come to you or the regional council? Where would
Susan Jackson, if she's on, can comment exactly how she'd want that to happen. But if someone asked me, I would ask her. Sure. And in fact, I give the national spreadsheet out maybe 20 to 30 times a year.
Okay, good.
But it's also available by region. And for anybody who can sort a spreadsheet, there, you can target your own area, province, or whatever you're looking for.
A couple of people have noticed a substantial change in their assessment this year and wondering how to query it or challenge it.
Well, again, to challenge it, the main challenge being, is it correct? Remember, we came out of COVID, so the calculation right now there is a reporting lag. So the calculation right now for 2024 would be based on your 2022 reported statistics, and the prior year was 2021, which was COVID. So if you took a real COVID hit, then you might be seeing a bounce. First of all, your assessment would have gone down markedly then, and might be bouncing back up a little bit. But it's also possible that if you coded something, like the only explanations are that your revenue has increased markedly, or your subtractions from revenue, which outward bound, went down. But it's literally based on the statistics that you submitted. So the first thing to do there would be, if you have a challenge or a query, Susan Jackson would know from your statistics, would be able to comment. And the ones I've seen this week, one was where a church got money from an asset sale, from the closure of a nearby church. That is money from an asset sale and shouldn't count, but it had been miscategorized.
So there might be an issue with the way that the income was reported in 2022, which would be affecting the 2024 assessment.
That's right. And the other reason there can be a bump is, you might have taken a significant revenue hit in 2021, and you're getting a bit of bounce back, post-COVID with reopening and stuff.
Okay, good.
But there is no rate increase. The whole idea is that assessment moves with church revenues, and so far that principle is holding.
I think that's helpful. Thank you. Tricia says, can you clarify the definitions of member, full member, and contributing household?
I am not touching that. Particularly, I'm sorry, on the member, full member. I shouldn't say I'm not touching that. I understand people, Steve, you might even want to answer that. I understand member to be somebody who's literally on the roll of a congregation. Non-resident member would be somebody who hasn't transferred their membership, but maybe you're not seeing that often because they might live farther away. Adherent, I've always understood to be one of those somewhat made up numbers, unless people track it, but who are associated with the church. Financially supporting households, that's the only number I'll comment on with any certainty. Whatever your definition, if it's over $50 a year or $100 or $1,000, whatever it is, your treasurer or your envelope secretary or somebody can tell you how many people there are for that.
Yep. So, and Tricia is pointing out children who are baptized are considered members of the church, but not full members until they have been confirmed. Our definitions of church membership have been shifting for as long as I've been in ministry and before, but that's kind of where that's at. The one that really matters for your statistical reporting is the contributing households, and that really is people who are regularly supporting the church.
Yeah.
So not the one-off memorial gift, but the people who, even if it's a once a year annual gift for the last 20 years, that would be a regular supporting of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think otherwise there are some definitions in the statistics handbook, the statistics guide, and I would follow those so that at least you're doing it the same way every year as you make your reporting, and hoping other people are doing the same thing too.
Yeah, and I've just gone back to show the link that it's online. It should have also been emailed to treasurers, and Susan every year tries to enhance it. I know it's a pretty long read, but she tries to make it as clear as possible in terms of what we're looking for, and does just a great job with that. So that would be where I would go for those definitions.
Sure, thank you. Adherents would be people who haven't officially joined the church, but who come and support and are a part of it. So I have people like that in my congregation. They've never actually stood up and officially put their name on the register, but they give money and they participate in the life of the place and they're active. So I attract them because it's a good sense of the activity and health of the place. Um, I want to, yeah, there are definitions of members in the manual. James is pointing out in section B32 and B33, and really, if you're wanting the theological definitions, that's the important place to go. If you're wanting to make sure you do the statistics consistently, and absolutely adherence can be a contributor household. I would say, oh, maybe up to 10% of my contributing households are actually adherents. They're not on the roll, but they give regularly enough, and they're part of the place.
And the ratios can be very different. Lots of people don't stand up and profess membership.
Yep.
Like I would think our, in my church, the percentage wouldn't be 10%; it would be higher.
Yep.
It might be 30.
So the last thing on the chat I want to raise tonight is not a question, and that's really kind of neat. It's an appreciation. Carol McKnight says, Mr. Fetter, could you read this out, please? Thank you for the UCC loan to help us repay the SEBA loan and retain the forgiveness portion from Camp Kidston. So they, among many others, benefited from your largesse, and they're grateful, and so thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for passing that on. Just a broad information. We're hoping that most people, most situations could cover it off, but we did want to offer that avenue. And I think it ended up a total of about 850,000 that the National Church has out there now with these swap out loans. It's intended to be a way to help, and it was. And if any of you see all the ads on TV, the last few weeks, let alone the lobbying that continues, glad to help.
Yeah, thank you for that. So that's the end of Eric's program. Just before we sign off tonight, I wanted to let you know that Eric is not going to be with us next month. He's going to be in New Zealand. I suggested he come on anyway, but it was going to be far too early in the morning. So Eric has suggested that Angelica and I will do a program on ADP. Introduction to the payroll service. It'll be our first run at trying to do an onboarding program for new payroll administrators in communities of faith. So we have done some work together, Angelica and I, around a structure for this and the kinds of questions we want to address. She's talking to her staff about the kinds of questions that come in through the customer service lineup. But as we move towards that for next month, we'd also really value your advice. So before you leave tonight, if you could put a couple of questions, a couple of thoughts in the chat for us. One is, what is the biggest struggle you have with the payroll system? What do you really need to know out of next month's webinar? And secondly, what do you think a new treasurer needs to know about ADP? If you could answer those two questions in the last in the last couple of minutes while we say our goodbyes, or stay on the line till you've done, I will take all of those notes into to my next meeting with Angelica, and we'll come with a bang-up presentation for you next month, even though Eric's getting a suntan. Otherwise, I think we're drawing to a close. So I want to say thank you to each of you. We had over 200 people online tonight, which is a record. It probably has to do with the multiple copies of the reminder that we sent out inadvertently. Gosh, if we keep getting this kind of numbers, we should do that again, right? Thank you. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you, Eric and Clyde, as always, for all the work that you have put into preparing this and sharing it. There was a lot of detail tonight and a lot of new stuff. And sometimes it comes out like a fire hose, but it sure makes a difference. And you can see the appreciation in the chat as we move along. I'm going to draw us to a close. I'll turn off the recording. Give me a minute, Eric and Clyde, and I'll take you out into a breakout room, but I didn't set it up because I was talking talking instead of working.
Mhm.
We'll look forward to seeing you all next time at the end of February. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, we're getting some good feedback already. That's great.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for these questions. This is really helpful. Okay. Open those rooms and I will stop the YouTube.